Good afternoon and welcome to the third of our webinars on Microsoft Copilot 365. Thank you for all for joining us. This afternoon we're looking to talk about Microsoft Copilot 365. If you're on our webinar last week, you will know that we were talking about the free version that comes with 365. This one is about the paid for version and the extra features that you have there. We're doing this in a slightly different format today because there's always different takes on how to use Copilot, and we thought it'd be good to do it more as a bit of a dialogue as well. So what we're looking to cover today is what is Copilot for 365, actually how that compares with ChatGPT. We're going to do a couple of demos on different parts of how you use it in particular contexts, and then we will cover a bit about GCSE and agents, kind of what we want to cover through. If you find what we've talked about today useful and want to find out more information, we are going to be doing more webinars over the next few months. And we're also doing an in-person event on the 17th of June for the whole day, which is talking about actually how you build prompts and how you actually get the most out of these systems.
If you do have any questions throughout the duration of the webinar, you should see a nice Q&A button at the top of your screen. So please feel free to pop any questions in there and we'll try to answer as many as we can at the end.
I'll be keeping an eye on the questions and then hopefully we can cover those.
Okay, so what exactly is Copilot? So Copilot is Microsoft's flagship AI assistant. As we've mentioned before, there are two versions of Copilot. There is Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat, which is the free version, and that's the topic of the webinar that we held last week. And then there is Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is the paid for version, which has additional features. It's a lot more powerful, and that's what is going to be the focus of today's webinar. So Microsoft 365 Copilot, or the paid version, is a chatbot. So you interact with it in the same way that you have done with ChatGPT and with any other AIs that you've been using recently. So moving on, if you did attend our webinar last week, you would have seen this infographic already, but we just wanted to reiterate what the differences are between the free and the paid version of Copilot. So predominantly, the main differences between the two is that with the paid for version, you get all of the features that are in the free version, including that enterprise data protection, and all of your data is kept within your tenant. But you benefit from a more powerful version of Copilot. It actually sits within most of your Office applications, and it's able to interact directly with your work data and with those applications. So it's not a case of just having a conversation window where you can talk to Copilot and get to generate a response, but actually it can complete actions within those applications, which is something that we'll look in more detail once we get to the demo section.
So most of you would have at some point tried ChatGPT, and some people I know are actually paying for the subscriptions. How Copilot varies from ChatGPT, it covers mostly these three areas. There's data security, in that with Copilot, your data remains within your 365 space. That means that it isn't leaving anywhere. You don't have to worry about any other people being involved with the data. It's just all there where all of your data already exists to start off with. The conversations you have with Copilot aren't used trained models. I know the paid for models, the paid for version of ChatGPT has some of that protection as well, but a lot of people I know are just using the free version, and that can be used to further train data, which means your content might appear in other people's prompts in the future. Also, Copilot has access to all of your work data, which means that you can ask in Word, for example, to write a brief description of your company, and it will do that because it has access to all of your information. It knows who you are and what you've done and what you've said in other similar documents. They both work in the same way of a natural language prompt where you type in and you get a response back. They are large language models. They're actually built on similar technology, or the same technology. Microsoft was heavy investors in ChatGPT right back at the start, and they continue to be there. That means that as new features are produced for ChatGPT, they are then integrated into Copilot. Maybe not straight away, they might be time while they actually work out how to implement this security and access to your work data. But broadly speaking, if you're asking similar prompts of the two, you should be getting similar outputs because it's going to be learning from your information. There might be slight differences.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point to make here is that we encourage a lot of people, if they are using ChatGPT, whether it's the free one or the paid version, actually a really good step is just migrating over and starting to use Copilot in its place, because then you are protected and all of your data is remaining within your tenant as opposed to being held by OpenAI and potentially being used to train the models.
And there are lots of other models, large language models, agents, and things that are coming out by different providers. And data security is one of those things a lot of people don't always consider when they're looking at a new system, and to consider whether that actually what is being done with their data they're providing these systems with.
Yeah, I mean, I know John mentioned there's lots of different models. We both use some of those other models for personal research and things, whether that's Perplexity or Gemini. But at the end of the day, it's really beneficial to use a Copilot as long as it's providing the services that you need, because it keeps all that data secure.
So one of the dreams of Copilot was that it was going to be able to integrate all of your existing applications. One of our disappointments, certainly one of mine, is that
definitely.
Copilot doesn't talk between applications. You have a Copilot for Outlook, you have a Copilot for Word, you have a Copilot for Excel, and so on. And you can pass a document between them, but it's disappointing that I can't, in a Word document, say, and now can you create a to-do list item, or can you now create an email? I hope that will come, but at the moment it's not there, and I find that a bit disappointing. I sort of be upfront with everybody at the start.
Yeah, we were sold the dream of a seamless single solution that would integrate with everything, and unfortunately that's not what we've got. That's not to say that what we've got isn't really beneficial and can really help you save time and be more productive. But yeah, it's as I say, it's something that we do say is a little bit of a disappointment so far with Copilot.
And hopefully some of that's going to come in the future. We'll just wait and see. Certainly there are other providers that are creating some fantastic systems which will do that, so I think it will come. But Copilot itself, as mentioned, exists in the different applications. You have your traditional desktop applications, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, OneNote. They've also integrated it into the newer applications like Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Microsoft Edge. Microsoft Edge is, for me, one of the main places that I access Copilot because it's built there in the browser. I can click on the icon. I can use it for doing research, summarizing a page, translating a page, which was useful the other week when I needed something. I think you've even had some success today, James.
Yeah, so one thing I actually found the other day within this, whilst we were practicing this webinar, is that you can translate PowerPoint slides directly in a Teams call now, which is really interesting. And additionally, I mean, Copilot pops up in random places sometimes. So I noticed the other day that actually it appears in Clipchamp now as well. So you can get it to create videos for you in Clipchamp, which is Microsoft's video editing tool. Yes, so it appears everywhere and there's constantly new ways to use it.
Basically, it exists in a lot of different applications and they're rolling out more. Wherever you see this sort of multicolored ribbon, which is in the bottom left-hand corner on your screens, that is where Copilot actually exists. And you can click on it. And in all of them, it'll either be related to that one application, or you'd have the option to search the web. Certainly, with Edge, I am now using Copilot in there more than I'm using Google. And a lot of my research begins there. And then I move on to looking at the resources afterwards.
Okay, so just to give you an example, if you haven't seen Microsoft 365 Copilot in an Office application, here is how it does appear in Microsoft Word. So there are actually two locations of where you can access Copilot, and they do tend to do slightly different things. So the first one is here, we've got sort of the inline editor. That will pop up when you start typing in a Word document. It will also pop up as a little icon if you highlight a section in Word. That sort of version of Copilot is really great for quick, specific tasks. So it's great for rewriting a section of content, or perhaps summarizing it or changing it slightly, or generating a bit of text. However, on the right-hand side, you'll also see that we've got a Copilot button here in the toolbar. That opens the chat window. So the chat window then pops up down the right-hand side, and this will be the same whether it's in Word, Excel, PowerPoint. You'll have this chat window. And this is much better if you're wanting to do more detailed prompts. So whether that's trying to summarize an entire document or ask questions about a specific document, perhaps you're trying to review some legal documentation, or if you're looking for any unanswered questions, for example, in a proposal that you've written.
And we just had a question about whether this is the same in Word, in Windows and Mac. And yes, the features will be the same across the two platforms and on the web.
Okay, so we're going to jump into our first demonstration here. So this demo, we are going to follow a process through using a variety of different Copilots. So the demo is based on a monthly sales report. So the idea being that we've got a monthly sales report that's been generated by a system that we've exported into Excel. We're going to start by using Excel to review and ask questions of some of the raw data. Following that, we'll use the desktop app to create a summary and produce some insights from the data. We'll then convert that to a Word document. From the Word document, we'll then create a PowerPoint presentation, and then finally, we'll use the Outlook Copilot to generate an email with a basic summary. So starting with Excel, we have our sales report here. So it's got all the sort of generic information that you would find in a sales report. We're going to use the Copilot chat window on the right-hand side. So we go up to Copilot, select the chat window, and then we're going to enter our prompt. So the first thing we're going to do is we realize that we've got the cost of the item and the price that we sold it for, but we don't know the profit margin for each item. So we're going to ask Copilot to see if it can calculate the profit margin for each item that we sold. Now, this is obviously a dummy sales report, and we did actually use Copilot to generate all of this data as well, because it saved us a lot of time. So Copilot has now understood our prompt. It's given us a formula, but it's also given us the results. So we've clicked to insert the column, and now it's added that directly into the Excel sheet, and it's calculated the profit margin for each item that we sold.
What I like is it's not the formula very simply to work out a percentage, but what's nice with the way the Copilot's paid attention to it is to make sure that it's got some validation in there, so you don't end up dividing by 0, and it's actually taking it a step further from the basic question you asked. And I do get a lot of questions from clients asking about formulas and things, and people have to remember. Now they don't need to really remember what the formulas are, they can just describe it, which makes Excel a lot more accessible for a lot of people out there who don't have the time to remember all formulas.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the first uses that I found really powerful when ChatGPT was first released was actually asking it to write out specific Excel formulas. And that saved me a lot of time, and I found it really useful, but it still took time because I had to indicate what information was in each column. And then I had to copy the formula from ChatGPT into Excel. Now with Copilot in Excel, it saves even more time because it puts it all in there for you. So the next example, now that we've got our profit margin, we're going to ask Copilot to generate a table and a visualization for the average profit margin per each salesperson. So again, we're using the chat window on the right-hand side. We give Copilot the prompt telling it what we would like it to do, and it's now analyzing the data, coming up with a formula, and then it's given us a bar chart. In this instance, we can review it. We click that we want to add it to a new sheet, and then it will populate in a new worksheet. So we've got the pivot table that it's created, and as well, we've then got the bar chart, which shows the average profit margin per salesperson across the period.
I think you've done a very simple prompt here, but we've also had a lot of success with we did some analysis the other week for a client, and we could do much more complicated prompts where we were trying to find out particular information from some of the records. So it had to filter out some records, then do comparisons and calculations, and then give us the results. and it does seem to handle most of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many things that you could do with this if you're trying to interrogate this type of data. So you could look for what products are the most popular, compare sales by region, lots of what if type questions, look at what products clients purchased and perhaps even when the last time a specific client purchased a product, so that you can then see whether you need to target them for renewals or that type of thing. So the possibilities really go on. The final example within Excel here is going to be conditional formatting. So again, this is something that a lot of people tend to struggle with, but we're going to put in a prompt to Copilot using the chat window, telling it based on the profit margin, can it color code whether the profit margin is above 30%, between 20 and 30%, or below 20%. So in this instance, Copilot has ingested our prompt. It's provided us with some information of how it's understood it and given us the opportunity to review that to make sure that we're happy with it. And then once we click apply, it will apply those conditional formatting rules, and there we have all the coloring.
Conditional formatting I find is interesting because when I do reviews with clients and sit with employees and go through stuff, it's so often I find people are sitting there and manually coloring in fields because they know there's a box for conditional formatting. Either they don't know what it means, or they just don't know how to use it properly.
Yep.
And build those up. So although conditional formatting is just one area, it can obviously do a lot more than just color coding boxes.
Yeah, again, it just shows how Copilot can kind of reduce that barrier to entry. So rather than spending time, somebody needs to sit there and work out what conditional formatting rules they need to put in. They can just put it into a prompt to Copilot in natural language that they understand, and then Copilot will be able to do most of the heavy lifting. Okay, so now that we've reviewed our Excel report, we are going to go into the desktop app for Copilot. Now, this is my probably most commonly used area of Copilot. I find it really helpful because you can have kind of ongoing conversations with Copilot about a specific topic. So what we've done here, first of all, is we've just attached the sales report to the chat. So as John said, fortunately, it's not completely seamless, and we do have to do a little bit of the legwork for Copilot, but we've attached the Excel file, and then we've given it a prompt asking it to generate a quarter-end sales summary report. So this prompt is obviously a little bit longer and a little bit more complex. We will look at some kind of good and bad prompting skills later on, but benefits basically being that a longer prompt with more detail in this instance is going to give us more closely the results that we're looking for.
And what's nice is they've just recently released the option to bookmark your prompts so that you don't have to remember it every single time.
Absolutely. So Copilot has now created us a written summary of that sales report. So it's identified some key figures that we asked it to, and then it's highlighted some narrative and insight as well. So for example, it's indicated that ASUS is the highest profit margin among the manufacturers and suggests potentially some reasons for that. However, now obviously we've got that information in Copilot. We've got two options. We could copy and paste that out into a Word document or into somewhere else that we need it. However, one of the things that Copilot can now do is actually turn that into a Word document. So asking Copilot to do that, and we've had some hit and miss with this type of prompt. What I've found is that actually if you specify to Copilot that you want a .docx file rather than just saying Word document, it's a lot more likely to be successful and get the results you want. As we have had some instances where I've asked it to create a Word document and instead it's just given me back the Excel file that I created. But yeah, if you do say that it's a .docx, you're more likely to get the result you're looking for.
Yeah, and it's one of these things that a few months ago was just terrible, and I definitely think it's got better since then. They are certainly improving, and it's learning from itself over time.
Yeah, there were times when we tried to get it to do Word documents in various ways, and it would do it once, and then you try 20 more times, and it wouldn't, but it's getting a lot better. Okay, so now that you've got your Word document, as we can see, Copilot has created some headers. It's got all the information in there, and the headers do actually align with our branding that we've got in our Word document. So we can notice here that some of the tables have not come through and been formatted correctly. So there is one quite useful little trick with Copilot. If you highlight the section in Word, click on the inline Copilot button, and you can then select to visualize the data as a table.
And I know you've done that mostly so you can show off the features, but of course you can change the prompt at the start to try and get around to avoid having to do that.
Absolutely, yeah. So as John said, you can bookmark your prompt. So if you'd bookmarked the prompt that we use, for example, to create this word summary, you could then go back and edit the prompt to say, make sure that all of the tables are formatted correctly for Microsoft Word, to save you that little step. But it can also be useful if you're reviewing a Word document that's been sent to you and not been formatted correctly, or something you're producing yourself.
Okay, so PowerPoints are one of these things that I've seen less of in recent years, but now with Copilot, I found that it's starting to make life a lot easier for you. If you actually set PowerPoint up properly with your own branding guidelines and your own templates, as we were all supposed to do, but nobody ever really did, but you actually do that now, it means that you can go into PowerPoint, open up a new presentation based off your templates, and then you can use the inline editor the same as you would in Word or Excel, and you can actually tell it to create a presentation. Now, in this instance, we're just going to do a very quick one of telling it to create a presentation based off of the document we've already written in the previous step. And you'll see it goes off and actually starts generating slides. We could be a lot more specific and start giving a lot more prompts about what we want to include, and it will do that and it'll learn from it. But for the benefits of this, I'm just telling it very quickly to generate the slides based off that document. You'll see it's generated them. It's used templates that are in this style sheet. It's split it up into sections. And actually, if you start looking through the slides, you will notice that it has actually written some notes at the bottom of some of the slides of points that should be covered when presenting. The system will pick up pictures from stock images. If you have a company stock branding site with stock images on there, you can configure 365 to take from those images first. Been a bit hit and miss at the moment, but I think that will just improve over time. And you've got a presentation. It does that. I know we've sped it up slightly for the purpose of this presentation, but it can do that in a matter of minutes. I think it's probably less than a minute usually to generate one. And then you've got a lot more time to actually go through and just tweak the content of actually what you want to have. And you don't just have to use a Word document as an input. I did one recently for a divorce lawyer to show them the features, and it created a very convincing, a very good presentation in a matter of minutes, covering the process for about divorce. Slight disappointment was that a few of the terms were a couple of years out of date, but actually the rest of the content was correct and just needed a little bit of tweaking, and it was ready to go. We also did one for a shared parental leave and what was involved in that, and the system was pretty accurate on explaining that and the costs automatically without having to supply any other information.
Yeah, so it is important to note that if you are doing this, you do have to open your template first, because Copilot will then just replace the content and keep all of the sort of design elements. Partly that's because at the moment Copilot is limited and only allows you to reference one file if you're trying to to base a PowerPoint presentation from. However, I mean, potentially if you did have multiple files that you wanted to create a presentation from, you could go back to the Copilot desktop app, ask Copilot to review and compare those files and create a single summary as a basis for a presentation, and then feed it that single file, which would be kind of one little workaround. But I would hope that in the future, Copilot will expand so you could potentially reference more than one file as the basis for the presentation.
It's one of the things we've not spoken about much here, but the ability in Copilot Chat to summarize across a number of documents has actually been quite useful. I had some quotes through for some hardware recently. They were all PDF quotes, but of varying different styles, and it made it difficult to compare them. And I was able to put them all into Copilot and tell it to create a summary for me of the different providers and what they were quoting for, and it's actually really helpful doing that. So in this example, we're just going to use one part of Copilot in Outlook.
John's favourite parts of Copilot.
Yeah. Copilot for Outlook I found ultimately disappointing so far. I know what I wanted from Copilot for Outlook, and it's not there. It will come. I am almost certain of it, but at the moment it's a bit short. So what we are doing here is just showing you getting it to draft an email. So again, you've got the inline editor the same as you have in the other applications. Once you're in the editor, you can then give it instructions for what you want the message to be. As you actually put the message in, and it can be the prompt as long or short as you like, it will then generate the content. If you're not happy with the content, you can give it some feedback and it will adjust the content based on what you're saying. So if you feel that so in this example, it's saying it's too formal and wants to make it less formal, then it can do that. What I found on the computer is I can tend to type quicker than Copilot can do what it wants to do. However, when I'm replying to emails potentially from my phone, which I might do of an evening sometimes, then what I can actually do is dictate into it instructions for what I want to do. We've got it here just writing a content of an email, but of course it can also reference other documents to give summaries and actually create different sorts of content depending on what it is you want to send in your emails.
Yeah, I think what we would both really like to see from Copilot in Outlook is its ability to understand our sort of tone of voice and how we would generally write an email, so it becomes more personalized to the individual. I think probably at this stage, Copilot's not going to do that because of the quantity of processing power that will be needed for each individual license to understand the user's tone of voice from all of their previous emails. And I think, as John pointed out, at the moment, they're really focusing on trying to help people communicate better.
Yeah, there's a whole coaching facility in here to actually encourage people to write more detailed emails. Certainly, I would tend to write more shorter emails than what this tends to write at times. But I can see that in certain situations, it would be better to have longer emails. And I think for some team members, it would definitely be better for their communications if they were to use the Copilot options rather than the way that they write emails. It's just something to get used to. I mean, Copilot for Outlook isn't just about writing emails. You can use it for summarizing emails. You can use it for
Sentiment analysis.
I use it on multiple occasions where I know I've had a series of emails from a client and it might collate them together so I don't have to go looking through all the emails separately. There is some useful parts to it, and they are rolling out new features. Like there is an option I've used a few times to say I just need to book a meeting with James, and it will then compare both of our calendars, find a time, put it in the diary without me having to do anything for that. But ultimately, I think this is an area that can improve a lot.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to find that Copilot and Outlook is necessarily where you're going to, it's not going to be the most useful part of Copilot. There's certainly other areas that are a lot more valuable. Okay, so we're going to do another quick demo now as well. And this one is mostly focused within the desktop Copilot application. So this is around the job description. So initially, we're going to use Copilot to create a structure of the job description. Then we're going to ask it to actually write the job description based on the structure that it has identified. And then it will generate a job advert based on that job description. So the reason mostly we wanted to show you this is that in theory, you could do this entire process with a single prompt. You could ask Copilot to write a job description for a specific role and then create a job advert at the same time. However, when things are more complex, like this, for example, it can be really beneficial to actually break it down into smaller steps, and you'll find that you might get a much better result.
I should just say here, Copilot desktop app that James uses most of the time has the same functionality as the Copilot mobile app, which I use on my iPad a lot more than I potentially use on the desktop when I'm drafting these things. So everything you can do here, you can do from a mobile device rather than sitting at your desk.
Yep. And if you have a conversation on your mobile device and then you need to switch over to your desktop, the chat history will all be there, so you'll be able to access it. So the first thing we're doing, as I said, is going to ask Copilot to generate the structure for a job description. So the first prompt is going to ask Copilot to identify what areas and sections should be within a job description, and then give some detailed information, so up to 3 bullet points of what specific information should be included within each section. So Once Copilot has ingested our prompt, we seem to be struggling with a little bit of delay here on the videos. It will produce the job description with all of the details. Now you could go back to Copilot and ask it to tweak some of this information because you think something's missing or you want to change the requirements for each section. But in this instance, what we've done is the next step is asking Copilot to produce a job description. So we ask Copilot to produce a job description for an IT support technician. But before it does that, we ask it to ask us any questions that it has to help better understand what exactly it is that we're looking for. So Copilot has then put together 2 or 3 questions for each section and asked us to answer all of those questions. So then we could go back in and answer each of those questions, and it gives Copilot a lot more context and understanding of what it is that we're trying to achieve with this specific prompt.
I'm going to suggest that you stop sharing and restart it. The video is being rather annoying. The tech gremlins have got in. The advantage of using videos in some of this stuff is that if there's any issues with the internet, it carries on working. But for some reason, they seem to be jumping around a bit. So don't say maybe stop the sharing and just reshare it a second. So even IT people have the wonderful joys of the tech gremlins getting in, causing problems. Okay. So let's hope that this time, hopefully the video will work better this time. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. Now we're going to skip the part where we ask Copilot to put the job description into a Word document because we've already shown you that. But the next step is asking Copilot to generate a job advert for that job description. So again, we select the file for Copilot to use, which is a job description we previously created, and then it will go ahead and use and create a job advert for us. Now, you could take this one step further, and one of the things that we found useful is that we have a very specific tone of voice document that sets out how all of our company documentation should be worded, and we could give that to Copilot as well, so that it understands even more what we would like it, how we'd like it to write in what style. But interestingly, with this prompt, we ask Copilot to include some information about us as heliocentrics. Now, if I'm just going to skip back through the video and hopefully it works. But you can see here, we didn't give it any links to any information. We didn't give it a link to our website or anything like that. But because it's embedded within our 365, it has access to all of that information already. So it has indicated it knows that we are heliocentrics. It knows that we're based in Marden, and it has written an about us section as well, giving some details of what we do. It's one of those things that it's not been, it learns from the content you've got available to you. And this is not necessarily the best example of it, but it does actually get better on some documents. So GCSE, this is the method that Microsoft have created for trying to create better prompts in your 365. Well, in all large language models, to be honest. And I think it works particularly well for us in the UK because we all have heard of GCSEs, but this is how the acronym to remember how to actually write a good prompt. So there are 4 steps to this. First one is the goal, the specific task or outcome that you want to achieve. What is it you want the prompt to actually do? What do you want the AI to do for you? The next one is the context, giving it some background information about what it is you want. What's the current situation? Why do you need what you're asking for, and who is involved in this? Source, any relevant data, documents that Copilot can use to complete the task. What information or sources can it use? Is it Word documents? Is it a website? What is it that you want it to do? I've used similar for a client recently who had to source some quotes before writing their newsletters. And we were able to just to only use gov.uk websites for sourcing. And so you can be very specific. Next, you have expectations. What is it you're expecting Copilot to do? How can it actually fulfill your requests? Is that you want a response in a particular tone or a style? Do you need specific elements? Do you need a table or a graph? I use a lot when I'm doing product research where I need it to review several products and then put them into a table for me at the end to make it easier to compare. So that's goal, context, source, and expectation.
Yeah, so next we're going to look at an example of a bad prompt and a better prompt. So based on the first demo that we went through with regards to the quarter end sales summary, so this would be an example of not a very good prompt. You've asked it to generate a quarter end sales summary report based on the attached file. So we have given it a goal, which is highlighted in blue, and we have given it some sources, which is the document, the Excel file. But in this instance, there's no context and there's very little expectation. So from this, you would absolutely get a quarter end sales summary, whether that's a written one or in a Word document, but probably you would get a different one every single time. So if this was something you were trying to get do on a quarterly basis, you'd get slightly different results with different data each time. So moving on to a good prompt or better prompt. Again, we've got the same goal, we've given it the same goal and the same sources, but we've added some context. So we've indicated that this is for Heliocentrics, which is an IT hardware sales company. And then we've gone quite heavy on the expectations. So we've told Copilot exactly what figures we want it to pull out. And then we've also advised it on how we want to present those figures. So given it relevant headers where necessary and put the data in tables formatted correctly for Microsoft Word. So then it knows exactly what we're doing. And as John said, we could save this prompt and reuse it every quarter.
I mean, and even then, this prompt is an incredibly short prompt. If you're actually going to do in a real world situation with a quarter end sales summary, the prompt could be 2, 3, 4 times longer than this of exactly what it is you're expecting from it. And I've seen some people even use files to attach to it to give it an idea of the format that he wants the Copilot to output.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can fall into a trap where they just give Copilot a really quick prompt and think that it's going to give them exactly what they want. And then when they start having to spend more time writing a prompt, they don't necessarily see the benefit. But it's worth investing, 10, even 15 minutes writing a really good detailed prompt because then the results will get better. And if that's still saving you 30 minutes, then it's, time well spent.
So prompt engineering is a new skill that we're all learning, but in reality, this is going to be difficult for a lot of people to learn. And I see this is where agents come in. Agents can do a lot of different things. And it's about building your own Copilot, is how they term it, or similar things exist in other language models. But it's about creating a custom experience. And you're basically going to specify one or more of those GCSE elements in your agent. So that might be the source, like SharePoint. You always want it to reference a particular document in your 365. It could be that you want it to reply in a particular way. But with all of those, it's about making it easier for those non-technical users or even yourself, so you don't have to remember to provide everything every single time you want to run a prompt. Now, you should, with a good agent, get more consistent responses. And you can connect in, I should add, a lot of other data. It doesn't just have to be to SharePoint. It can be websites, it can be CRM systems and other sources of information to make life easier. If you have an agent, you can also make it a pay-as-you-go agent. So people within your organization do not need to have a 365 license. And actually that is available outside your organization as a chatbot you can put on your website as well.
Yeah, so I think there's a kind of a good analogy that we've kind of been working on, which is that if you look at Copilot in itself as the basic version, the paid for version of Copilot, but without an agent, it's a bit like having an apprentice or a new employee. you need to give them a lot of context and source and expectations each time you're communicating with them, because they don't have the experience of working with you or in your business or potentially within your sector. So you need to give them a lot more surrounding information each time you give them a task. Whereas if you build an agent, you provide them with a lot of that context, those sources and expectations beforehand. It's a bit more like having a more senior employee who knows a lot more of that information because they've been around for a while. So it can really help to speed things up and increase that productivity even more.
Now, generating agents within 365 is actually really straightforward. It's as simple as finding a file and you can just click on it and say create an agent and then customize it. This is the more advanced version, not the most advanced, but a next step up in customization, and we'll just go through the full steps. So the first step part of this is you're just giving the agent a name so it knows what it's doing, and you give it a description. What is the purpose for the agent? So there's a bit of a context, I suppose, in the system, so it understands what is its purpose for existence. You then specify sources. Now, for most cases, this will be a SharePoint document, a SharePoint library, a folder. It can be external content with a bit more work, but from a lot of you, it can just be as simple as connecting it to a data source. So in this case, I've connected it to some demo sales data to follow on with what we've already talked about. But I could quite easily connect that to other sources of documentation. Microsoft have a suggestion for an employee agent, so they can ask questions of the handbook or of benefits and other content like that.
Yeah, so the benefit is you can link it to an entire SharePoint library. So whether that's internal documentation, all of your HR policies, or whether it's all of your product or process guides or service policies.
I mean, lots of people do have quite detailed product sheets, don't they?
Yeah.
And the fact that they can actually then query those from a text agent is quite useful. And then finally, you give it the behavior. How do you want Copilot to respond? I mean, the first section here at the top is about how you tell a user they can use the prompt, the Copilot, with a few suggested prompts. But ignoring that, at the bottom is where you give some more detailed information about how the Copilot is going to respond to you. And what I'm going to show over the next few slides is just a few of those examples. So first of all, you've got your data, we've specified it. You saw James's prompt earlier about having to attach the file. Because this agent is specifically for the finance information, I don't have to give it anything more than just telling it to summarize key information, and it will generate me a summary. Then, if I want to ask it even more detailed questions, I can ask those, and it will always reference the same source. I don't have to go in and start telling it, using the sales data from this date, the file is located here, I need you to do this, this, and this. No, don't have to worry about that. All I need to do is just ask it a question, and it will find that information for me. And then I can look at how I change the output. So that last page I showed you when you're setting up a prompt, I set it up so that it will always reply in rhyme, which is on the left, completely unusable in this situation, but it gives you an idea of the extent of how you can change the responses. And then on the right-hand side here, I changed the agent so that it had a detailed structure of how I wanted to have a quarterly sales report. So in the future, I just have to tell it to run that sales report, and it will complete the information for me in a consistent format. So agents exist throughout. Well, there's already pre-built agents in your 365 as part of the system, but you can always add on more agents later with your own data. Microsoft are creating agents for interpreter, a prompt coach to help you write better prompts. Yes, the irony of having a Copilot or an agent help you write better prompts to an agent is not lost on me, but you can have one there. There is a researcher which is coming soon, which is going to be built around ChatGPT's deep research, I believe. And that I think is going to be really helpful. I already use the ChatGPT one and Perplexity to do a lot of deep research when I'm doing things for clients. And it's a lot easier than using Google to try and find things. and facilitator, which is going to be an agent that can join in with Teams meetings and assist you during the meeting to keep things on track or answer questions and produce notes.
Yeah, we haven't really mentioned Teams too much. And I know a lot of people use Copilot in Teams, and it's one of the big selling points of Copilot. For us, Copilot within Teams does have some good features. It is able to record and transcribe your meetings, and you can then follow up and ask questions of it. There is some big drawbacks for us though currently, which is why we actually use a separate third-party system called Fireflies, which we did a webinar on a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months ago. And the main reason for that is that Teams Copilot is only able to join meetings where you are the event organizer. So for example, if John was to invite me to a meeting, virtual meeting, and I had Copilot 365, but John didn't, my Copilot wouldn't be able to join, and therefore I wouldn't have any sort of notes or transcription after the meeting. But with Fireflies, it is able to do that. So we do anticipate that Microsoft will, or hope that Microsoft will be sort of looking to remedy that in the near future. And then we probably potentially would move away from Fireflies and back to Copilot so that everything is then again retained within the tenant. But that's why at the moment we haven't really touched too much on Copilot in Teams. So how do you get Copilot for 365? So Copilot is an annual license. It does cost £277 per user. And no, unfortunately, you are not able to share licenses between users. It is only available on an annual license. There is no monthly subscription option. Now, we don't know Microsoft thinking behind this, but we suspect that it's probably because Microsoft are very aware that there is a bit of a learning curve with Copilot, and it does require some investment of time. When you first get Copilot, you might use it for the odd bit of generating of text or maybe summarizing a document. But the more you use it and the longer you have it, the more ways you will find to use Copilot. For example, just this morning, I was trying to move some information essentially from one service to another, and there was no way for me to export the information from the first service. So what I did was I actually asked Copilot within Edge to gather all the information that I needed from the web page, put it into a text file in a format that I needed, and then I was able to import it straight into the new service. And that probably saved me a good half an hour, if not more. And that's something I've only just thought about this morning. So it's one of those things, as I say, you have to invest time and just keep trying different things, because as John said as well, sometimes something doesn't work and then you try it again a couple of months later and you find that you get a much better result. And also with Microsoft Copilot for 365, you don't have to license all of your users. So you can just start off with one or two or a specific team and roll it out to them before rolling it out to everybody else.
And that sort of leads nicely on to how to drive adoption. Copilot is a new tool. It's not something that we've had before. It's going to take some time for people to get used to it. I know, as with any technology being rolled out, it can take a little bit of time to convince everybody within the organization they can make use of it. And that's not just all of you out there. We have the same problem sometimes with our own organizations and actually trying to encourage people to make use of these things. I was talking to a client not too long ago who's been around in business for a while, it's fair to say, and they were telling me when they were trying very hard to convince their bosses when they first started out to move away from typewriters onto word processors. So this is just the next step along the journey with these things. What we sort of suggest is that people should try and select a couple of people to be product champions, to try these things out, willing to give it a go and see what works and what doesn't work, and kind of just look to improve things. There is training available, both with Microsoft to produce some training through Viva Learn, which is a platform that you all have access to. You may not realize it, but it is there. There is also training that we and other people can do, and we will certainly be doing more webinars on this in more detail. Biggest thing is kind of communications and sharing it with people. Communications and ideas sharing. We use Viva Engage, which anyone with 365 has access to, and I think Viva Engage is a great platform for sort of sharing these sorts of things. I don't know how you describe it, more of a internal social network, probably.
Yeah, it is a little bit like that, sort of closer to Facebook, I would say, than LinkedIn maybe, but it's an opportunity to post, post files, post comments, and you can create a post and then your team or whoever else can respond to that whenever they see the notification or when they have time at a later date. And you can create communities within Viva Engage. So I think one of the things that we would recommend is that if you use something like Viva Engage, you could create a community for those product champions and anybody else who's interested to actually share both their wins with different prompts and different ideas and ways of using Copilot, but also sometimes their failures, because it may be a case that they've tried a specific prompt or tried a specific action with Copilot that's not worked, and somebody else in the team may have a different approach that they can suggest, whether that's using a different version of Copilot, because sometimes we find the results do differ from perhaps Word to the desktop app, or whether it's tweaking the prompts to add some additional expectations or change it so you get the results that you're more looking for. But it's, as I say, it's about that communication and idea sharing to come up with new ways to use Copilot.
And perseverance is just keep going with it. It will make a difference. It certainly makes my life easier. It's difficult to always quantify how much easier it is, and I do get asked that question. But AI, there's different places where it just saves you a lot of time. Yes, what I'd love is an agent that tells me in the morning, you need to do this, this, and this, and I've drafted replies to these people, which realistically it's not there yet. But I think within the next few years it might be. But right now I can save a lot of time by using these different tools, and I think a lot of people can.
Yeah, I think John's probably being a bit pessimistic there. I think that's probably going to come even quicker, but there is, as I say, quantifying how much time it saves us is a big challenge. With the paid for version of Copilot, you do get some reporting that tries to calculate that. I would question quite how they track that and whether it's very accurate. But what I can say is that I use Copilot every single day without failure in a variety of places. And I find new ways of using it fairly regularly, as that example I gave earlier. So it is, yes, perseverance, keep trying, try different things, maybe try the same things again, but in a few months if it's not working, and be prepared to fail, but try again, because there will be a way of doing it soon.
Okay.
So just to share this slide again from the beginning, if you have found today's webinar useful, we are going to be continuing to do more webinars on a monthly basis on different topics. So keep an eye out for those. You can use the QR code on the screen that will go straight to our events page, and you can sign up to the webinars there. Also keep an eye out for our newsletters, because we'll have information about any upcoming webinars or other events in those newsletters. They go out once a month. We do also provide bespoke training consultancy. So if there's a specific query you have or something you'd like us to investigate solving a solution for you, then please get in touch. And just to remind, we are doing that in-person Copilot Masterclass. So if you want to dive deeper into Copilot and have the opportunity to actually get hands-on with Copilot in some real-world scenarios, then please follow the QR code as well, and you can book onto that. That day is based on a Microsoft event that they've produced. We are just tweaking it slightly to make it more suitable for small and medium businesses.
Okay. Well, either we've put everybody to sleep, or there is just covered every possible content, but we have no questions. I'll hover for a second here and ramble on if anyone wants to type a question, and we will try and answer it. But otherwise, what I will say, if there's nothing coming through, that it's been great sort of talking about these things. James and I are always here, happy to have a chat with people about all these bits. And maybe if you want any more information, do contact us. We do have booking links. And yes, Jamie, we will provide a link after this to not just this webinar, but if you look on our website, on the events page, there is links to all of our previous webinars as well. So that's great. Okay.
Great. Thanks very much, everyone, for
Thank you very
joining.
much.